Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Business with me, Danny Pardo. This is number 2 of 2 in the series of interviews with the authors of this, The Startup Teacher, a fantastic book to help you as a teacher gain control of your own personal development, whether you've been doing it for a decade and a half like me, or if you're new to the game or wherever you are at on your career journey. So this time we're having a chat to Michelle. So with Michelle, we're going to have a listen to her career journey and see why she found it so important to really get to helping teachers out with this book and their personal development. So here we go. Let's talk business with Michelle. Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Business with me, Danny Pardo. We are heading to Europe this time. We're chatting to Michelle. So good morning, Michelle. How are you today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us. So where in the world are we talking to you from today, Michelle?
I am in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Oh, fantastic. So I've never interviewed anybody in Europe, so this is quite exciting. So you're an hour ahead of the UK time here.
Yes.
So what are you doing in Switzerland? And before we get, as we kind of answer that question, so we know who we're talking to, who is Michelle?
Sure. So yes, name's Michelle. I'm a former teacher. I'm the co-founder of something called the Educators Lab. We've been doing consulting work for years on how we can rethink teacher training and professional learning. And the journey continues. I'm in a new country. We just came back here. We've lived here before, but in February. I'm also working on an ed tech tool. It aligns with what we do at the Educators Lab, which is really promoting entrepreneurial thinking, so people can learn how to turn problems into possibilities, if you will. And yeah, so that is, I think, me in a nutshell.
Wow. So, I mean, the Educators Lab sounds kind of interesting. I know, as I was saying, I don't have the prop today. I don't have my book that I've brought that you and Darcy wrote, The Startup Teacher. And I know I've seen the Educators Lab kind of online and haven't really got stuck into that too much yet. So we'll definitely get into that in a little bit. So you seem to be a pretty busy person. So, I mean, how did you get to where you currently are? What's your career journey? When you were back in, say, high school, or if you went to college, did you always think, oh, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to teach and set up a nice online platform for teachers? Was that the thinking when you were like 17, 18?
No, I think that's what's interesting. So when I was younger, I had wanted to be a marine biologist. And then I realized I'm too scared to dive with sharks. So diving is cool, but not with big sharks. So I was like, okay, maybe that's not a great career choice. And then I was interested in international development, and no, teaching actually kind of found me. And I would say my career journey has more been led by figuring out the problems you want to solve along the way. And that is kind of what, helps you on your journey. So, and I guess just to explain that a little bit more, when I was in college, I actually had done an internship in DC, and it was like an 8 to 10 hour camp. It was incredibly long, and they couldn't find enough teachers in it. So they had this 4 hour academic portion. And since I was there and I said, I'm interested in doing that, they let me do it. But I loved it. So that's kind of where I found out I wanted to be a teacher. And then I went into teaching, and then I became a bit frustrated as a teacher because I felt like it was very clear what students needed, and I didn't feel encouraged or empowered to build solutions, if you will, for my students. And I noticed professional learning was an ideal outlet to provide that space for teachers to collaborate and to work on initiatives, et cetera. So that's kind of what has transitioned. That has kind of just led me on this whole journey, is just kind of noticing problems and then seeing opportunities and trying to jump on them when I can.
Yeah, and these problems and opportunities that we're talking about here, that's quite interesting. And you mentioned the internship there. So, we had things like that. Was that a paid internship, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't know if I remember. I think it was a stipend deal.
Right.
Yeah. I do think it was a stipend deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of internships then, and getting that experience and the importance of working somewhere and getting something on the CV and the resume and making those links and connections. I mean, for you, it seems that it actually changed your career and literally,
yeah, I mean,
in the road moment.
Yeah. I actually started working when I was 15. So in Europe, I noticed this is not, I feel like I I don't run into as many people that have done this, but no, I actually got a permit. My parents had to sign it that I could work when I was 15. So my first job was at a store, and I was a clerk. But you're mentioning like kind of working on different things at once. I got used to at a very early age multitasking. So, you needed to make sure you had your good grades, you went to your job, obviously you want to socialize, you do after school activities. So, I think getting experience in the workplace was good for a variety of reasons because it just sets you up with life skills or, even financial literacy, getting your own paycheck, having it go in the bank. Managing what funds you do have. I think there's a lot of value in, and yeah, getting real world experience when you can, when you're young.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's great to hear it from you because it saves the students having to listen to it from me over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, cash is important. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And to the students, when you're 17, 18, it is very important. And I guess it's hard sometimes when you're 16, 17 to think, oh, this experience is going to help me when I'm 25. But it's certainly, and you're proof that it's given you those experiences, hasn't it, with regards to that.
Yeah, and it's just a necessity, like you start driving early over there 16, so it's like, hey, you want gas in the tank, you need money for it. So there's that. So there's just the very practical value if you don't
There
have
we
money,
go.
you're not
Yes,
doing much.
exactly. It
Yeah,
goes back to your problems and solutions, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah.
You want to
Yes.
drive, you better earn some money then.
There
So,
you go. Yeah, I was taught that pretty young.
yeah.
Yes.
So, as we go into then, like where you currently are with the Educators Lab and teaching, how long did you teach for? Was you like a professional teacher for a few years and then went off
Yeah.
on the tangent to where you are now?
So I taught for a few years in the US, and then I actually did a master's in Spain, in international relations. And this is where I got really introduced to social entrepreneurship, which I love. And that's really kind of helped me on my journey. Got really into design thinking, the methodology, just all these kind of processes people use to, to take action or to do something with ideas. So in any case, after that, we moved back to Switzerland and I taught for a few more years. So have gotten to teach public, private, here, there. So which was nice to go back into the classroom because it seemed that no matter where I taught, kids are kids. Their needs might be different, the context might be different, but people are people. And I did notice some pros and cons to like a public school versus private school world, and I know that varies as well by country. But interestingly enough, some of the same problems persisted, right? Like your kids need you, you see opportunities. Is the school you're working in providing you with the support to do something? And that's something that seems to be hit or miss everywhere you go. So
And when you're talking about kids are kids, and that's really interesting to hear because I've been fortunate enough to chat to teachers all over the place. And these kind of common themes keep coming through. And one of the things I mentioned to Darcy was early on in your book, you talk about an invisible backpack are the things the students carry around with them. So things that may be happening at home, the mental stresses of just life at the moment, and all the things that are going on in the world. We're doing a unit on the environment at the moment, and it's hard to give any kind of positive news about that. It's all kind of doom and gloom, so we're having to deal with that. Obviously, let's throw in a global pandemic in the mix as well. Why don't we? And then the job for teachers then becomes, oh yeah, but they've still got to pass an exam. And that really resonated with me. Did that chapter come from kind of your travels and you've seen, wow, these students, if you're 16, 17, you're dealing with all of this? Is that something you've seen in Madrid, Switzerland, and over in the States?
Yeah, that's everywhere. I mean, and that's what the thing is the solutions are usually different. So for instance, not being engaged or mental well-being, the kids just they might have the same problem, but I mean, honestly, that can even change between like your period A class versus your period 5. They just might need different things to kind of overcome some of the they bring the weight of the world on their shoulders. And like they just have different experiences, different things are happening at home, they have different opportunities available to them. So and usually as teachers, that's what you're naturally figuring out, because we all know you can't teach anything if they come in hungry, if they come in angry, you're not getting much done. So I mean, and I think that's a role of the teacher that gets largely ignored by a lot of the rest of the population is, they don't realize like I say a lot, teachers are a last line of defense for a lot of kids, so if we don't notice, who's going to? And I think that's a lot of the work that teachers do. And I think that's a lot of the work teachers want to be addressing when they do have time to collaborate and solve problems, because we already know learning's not going to happen if some of these other things aren't addressed.
Yeah, and I think you can see that as an adult as well, can't you? I mean, you've probably, like me, sat in numerous training sessions and professional development sessions and things like that. And you've either had an interesting evening at home, something's going on with your family, or there's things going on. And as an adult, and I know what's going on, and I still struggle. So if you're 16, 17, or even younger, how on earth are you supposed to process? Today I am hungry, therefore I will act like this. This mental choice.
No, you don't know it. Yeah, no, for sure. I totally agree. And like, just to give an example of something like basic, I remember a couple of my students, it's one of my first years teaching, I got in trouble and they needed to go to court. And I was like, what are you going to wear? And they were like this, and it was a pretty bad ensemble. And I was like, if you wear that, the judge is literally going to judge you by how you look, because they'll think you look like you don't care. They're like, what do you mean? And I was like, you need to wear something nice. Like, what would you wear to like an event, like a wedding, something fancy? And they're like, well, I guess I would wear that. And I was like, that's what you need to wear. And then but no one would tell them this. Right. So I think with managing emotions, just the basics of etiquette, sometimes like, I don't think, yeah, I mean, that's what teachers are dealing with. Like I said, last line of defense. If mom didn't tell them, you're trying to tell them. So
It's on me and us.
yeah, basically. I mean, yeah. So
And I hear that, and I hear some people complain about that, and I've had my moments where I have as well, but I've kind of come through the other side of this now, what I'm about to mention. That teachers are teachers, yes, but we're also, to a certain extent, social care workers, security guards, counsellors, therapists, mentors, friends in an appropriate sense of the word here, in terms of being somebody to talk to and divulge information to. And I hear people now complain about that, and I understand, because I've been there and kind of been through that thought process. But now, teachers are all those things and more, aren't they? Would you agree with that? That you say the word teacher and people go, oh, cool, you get them to pass exams, and you go, oh, okay.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And I think the reason why people would complain is because it's just not recognized, it's not valued. And the thing is you might not want to do that, but you can't help what walks in the door. Like, you can't help, like, learning doesn't happen sometimes if you cannot address these things. So it's just part of the job. And I think sometimes it can feel like extra baggage, because as you were saying, like, I mean, look at COVID. You have your own kids to take care of, you have to do that, like, virtual learning with them, then you have all these other kids. So I think that's also why mental health has become really a top issue this year for teachers, is because they're just on overload, because it's not sorted in their own homes, and then you have other people's children and other people's stuff, and it's a lot. So
it's a lot is definitely an understatement. It's
yeah.
been a trying time. And if it's been a trying time for us teachers and adults, then it's almost impossible to imagine what it's been like for the people who were facing me in class, and then having to think, oh my gosh, what I do today determines a grade for here and a grade for there, but my plan was to go to university and do these things. So it's a real heavy load for everyone involved, for sure. I mean, this is where maybe your Startup Teacher book can help. So I've been having a look through I've kind of skipped through a couple of chapters. You say at the start of it that you can kind of get stuck into the intro and then think, okay, I want to learn about this, I want to learn about that. So I looked at kind of the leadership in the classroom section. I looked at mental health, because that's a big thing for me. So what are you trying to achieve with the Startup Teacher book then?
Yeah, sure. So what we basically noticed, I mentioned before, love design thinking, love lean methodology. They all have their merits, and they're really, if people aren't familiar, they're basically, it just provides you with like a strategic kind of process or mindset to solve challenges. And so what we've noticed with teachers, and we tend to run kind of, more open-ended workshops or things so teachers can personalize professional learning, is people are really good about maybe talking about the problems, but taking action and doing something is where people kind of don't get any training, right? So, and you hear it, right? Like you can go to staff room, you can talk to teachers, and they'll just you know, and they need to. You kind of just get this unload of like, oh my god, and this has having this and this, and they're overwhelmed and it's frustrating. So what's nice is when you have a strategy, is when you can recognize, like, you know what, the baseline problem here is everyone's overwhelmed. What can I do to alleviate this? And that's what we specifically tried to do, was create tools so people could say, you know what, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try something out, because that's how I'm going to push forward, is by trying to find a solution. And then in the book, what we've noticed is when we kind of run these sort of like innovation workshops is, and there's a few ways to do it. Like sometimes you can run these workshops and everybody works on the same challenge, you know, like how can I bring more social emotional learning into my school, right? And people come up with these nice different kind of ideas on how to tackle that. But sometimes you can also do it where you're just like, okay, we have this time, and it's interesting because without the document, people just tend to talk. But pick something you want to address in your classroom. But by giving the tool and writing it down and talking about it, people actually have that plan of action they need to bring back to their classroom. And then with the book, what we also notice is beyond the tool, and this is something that we've learned a lot from like the startup world, is you need to focus on emotional intelligence. Leadership, unfortunately, in education is usually used synonymously with administration. Well, no, leadership is just building relationships with people, learning how to work with them. And that's exactly what every teacher does with their students, with their colleagues, you're trying to figure out how to work with these people to learn. Like, so we just tried to provide strategies, because that's the second half to when you get overwhelmed, is okay, like you see a solution, how do you engage other people in the idea so that they work with you to solve it? And then finally, the last thing we focused on was really the self-care piece, because it's tiring to do this. You get burned out, and we've noticed schools and more, like teachers can do things in their power, but more so even schools, when they nurture certain things in people, like for instance, when you have a group of super motivated teachers who are in there, and we call this heart, for because they believe in what they're doing, because they love teaching, because they want to make an impact for the kids, don't kill that, because as soon as you do, you're not going to get people who want to work on things anymore. And I think that's the other thing that's happening with this mental health piece, is most teachers I've met went in there because they wanted to make a difference in the lives of kids. Like most, I really I can't even think of somebody who's told me otherwise for their reason to going into the profession.
I think
Um,
it's too intense of a job. It's too much of a lifestyle. You know, oh great, we get great holidays. Oh, you finish at 3 in the afternoon. No, you know, it's too much. It's too intense, isn't it? To be able to say I'm doing it for a paycheck. That's kind of my feel on it. There's got to be something else there, because I could do other jobs for a paycheck.
yeah.
There's got to be something else to it. You know.
Well, because it's, you have such a connection with your students. So, you know, whether you're, you know, in primary, maybe have 30 or less. I mean, I don't know about you. I always taught secondary. I had 150 or less. And you would be sitting there and like, this has this going on. And then this one has this, because you care about them. So it's just very different from other jobs, because it's all encompassing. I mean, it just takes your all, because you just have a connection with so many of your students, and you genuinely care. I mean, this is why we worry about all this stuff, right? Is, and even if you don't want the baggage, it comes with it, because they're people and you care about them. And yeah, so that's why we added this last section kind of on self-care. And it goes two ways. Like there's strategies, you know, teachers can employ to make sure they're, you know, they're good and they're working on their own well-being. But a lot of this comes down to administrators and districts, and how are they treating their teachers? You know, we talk a lot about trusting teachers. Well, what does trust look like? Because as soon as you say, oh yeah, I trust my teachers, but I'm going to micromanage them, not trust how they do remote learning, force them to use this one application and then this specific curriculum, you know, and so there's just this kind of catch 22 in the education space, where we talk a lot about trust and well-being and whatnot, but then actions speak louder than words.
Are you trying to get me fired by getting me to agree to all these things? I mean, normally I share these videos with
Not.
teachers, and now I'm thinking, oh no, what am I going to do with this bit? But no, I agree with you, and it is really hard. And we have to be careful as teachers then, or I have to be, not to fall into that trap in the class as well. I mean, your section on leadership, and normally when you see leadership in an education book, you think about moving up through the ranks.
Yeah.
In the States, we call the administration levels. Over here, senior leadership teams and things. Leadership, when you see it in education, people often go, oh, right, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to do that. But what resonated with me and what I've thought about for a while now is that you are the leader in the classroom. You're the role model. You're the disciplinarian if needed. You're the voice that kind of, you're the facilitator is another word that's a key word that's bandied about a lot but not used that much. The leadership in the classroom as well. Have you seen that kind of in evidence then? Is that why that's been such a big part of like the Startup Teacher book, that you are leaders in your classroom?
Have I seen evidence of it?
Yeah.
More so, I mean, I didn't understand. So for instance, with design thinking, with any company, if they want, and this will get you not data so much on schools, but let's say they're trying to measure productivity. There's all kinds of evidence on why transformational leadership, which is what we largely use, motivates people, why it engages people. So I don't understand why the same principles wouldn't be found with working with students or working with staff. So if you're, yeah, I mean, if you're looking to get people to, improve and to be better, I mean, there's all kinds of data from the business world on how certain leadership strategies get certain results. So I imagine they would apply in the school space. It's just, I don't know if anyone's measuring them.
Yeah, and that another thing that I saw in your book that kind of ties into a little bit that in terms of micromanaging things, or maybe a bit larger, is that you actually tied in what the requirements of the curriculums are. I mean, in the States, you talk about the districts, what the district is setting that you have to teach. We have our national curriculum, and again, you don't see much in terms of educational thinking that here's the curriculum and everything else has to go with this, and then tying in all the other kind of I don't know if soft skills is the right word, but certainly tying those two together. Normally it's kind of all curriculum or all personal and social development, but you seem to tie that together there. Is how much of a challenge is that you've discovered in your career and speaking to other people to think, I've got to teach this, but I also want to do it like this? Is there a match or is there a problem?
Again, see, I'll get you in trouble because for me, I started teaching. I was teaching in Virginia, and they just handed me a binder, and it is content. And our standardized test is literally pick A, B, C, D. So for me, and then I'll just use this example. I had seen this tweet, and it just struck me because it's like, who's teaching fact checking? I've heard no one teaching this, and it was like, so yeah, so that's what social studies should be for. If children learn to write, they should naturally learn how to make a compelling argument by identifying clear sources and understanding who key experts are. But if the only thing that the statewide assessment is pushing is you memorizing facts, is just content, then I don't know how many teachers are doing the fact checking skills, which would just be naturally, yeah, you should learn how to write an argumentative essay. And then that way, hopefully, I don't know if you've seen our debates, everyone just screams at each other. People would hopefully also learn how you have a constructive debate because you learn how to make arguments, cite your sources, blah, 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 blah. So in any case, for me, a lot of teachers talk about this because we know that the skills are what matter. Not that they memorize these little facts, but they have the skills to apply the content, to formulate an argument, to synthesize data, to see patterns. And I'm saying, when I say patterns, like in history, because we see them constantly. And so I think it's not very hard to blend the two. Because you can take any piece of content or curriculum and use the skills, right? Because the skills are what matter, especially with the power of Google now. I think the biggest problem, though, is that we keep talking about this, and then we just talked about all the baggage that kids have. Teachers are trying to deal this, and at the end of the day, their job is being evaluated on whatever the test evaluates. So then we cannot get mad at teachers when some of them focus on the content, because that is what the state or the government has mandated is what's actually of value.
Yeah, and it dictates then pay increases, which then affect your family, and if you can pay your mortgage, and can you live the lifestyle you want to live. But, you know, fact checking is such a thing that I can't believe people still say that it isn't important. You know, with social media, a lot of our students live on social media, for want of a better term, you know, especially in the last year or so, when we haven't even been allowed to go anywhere, let alone before or after now, but we can do a little bit, you know, and may see things. And we did a little activity in class where we used Canva, and I created a piece of fake news within about 45 seconds on the board to make an Instagram post. You know, put a picture of a doctor in, put a COVID-19 fact on there to show them how easy it is to create this media narrative that, well, if you read this person, if you read that person, they're going to say different things, you know. I mean, and they were astonished that you did that in under a minute. I'm like, yeah, imagine if you did that all day and posted it to all the social media sites and you believed it. But again, what do they do with that? That's not going to get them the criteria to pass the exam. You know, and it's a real kind of tricky situation.
It's a great life skill. But that's the thing. That's what's more important, right? Than them being able to go in and say, okay, in the year 1862, because they can always look that up. But if they don't know what to do with the information, you know, that's bad. So for instance, understanding, you know, misinformation and how it can manipulate a lot, right? Because it manipulates voting patterns, which therefore manipulates what policies come into place. I mean, this has a major impact on your life. So yeah, I think there needs to be some hard conversations, because again, the dialogue is like, oh yeah, skills, but then when push comes to shove, it's clear what certain places value based on what they assess.
Yeah, and it's certainly personal development that, you know, I've got to work on. One of my colleagues asked, I asked some of my colleagues if you'd like to ask some questions to some interviews, and one of them, Dan, our brilliant kind of sports teacher here, he said, you know, what skills did you learn at college that you remembered? And of all the past students of mine I've interviewed, none of them have said, oh, I really enjoyed that lesson you did on the Boston Matrix, or when we did profit and loss and break-even analysis, I remembered how to do that graph. No, that didn't come into it. It was, do you remember that time we went to so-and-so, and then and you made so-and-so go up to the booking and check us all in? Like, yeah. Oh, that's what you remembered. You know, they don't, as much as I'm a teacher and I spend all my time in classroom getting them to do this, it's all these little conversations and things that they remember, and you go, oh my gosh, you know. And it's hard as a new teacher to kind of get to that point that, oh, they're going to remember what we do here. I mean, how difficult is it then for new teachers to get into this mindset of doing this in terms of, you know, all the challenges they've got? And I see a lot of burnout. I'm sure you've seen it as well in terms of new teachers, and the training year is the hardest year ever, and it is. So, I mean, what kind of issues do you see facing new teachers as they enter the profession?
I mean, it's everything we said. I think that's the thing. I feel like you go into teaching really like it's not that bad, and then you kind of realize a lot of the stuff the other teachers have kind of told you. But the thing I think to remember, I mean, I switched out of this because I did it on my maternity leave, and the US doesn't have part-time contracts like Switzerland does. So for me, starting the educators lab, and I was actually shocked because a lot of organizations realize like what we're talking about, everyone's aware. No, just nobody knows how to fix it. So a lot of organizations realize like, yeah, our professional learning is like, we could use help. So I was able to turn that into like part-time consulting so I could also be home with my kids. But I think for the teaching, I mean, it's just important work. And so as long as you focus on the students, most people love it. So I think there's been a few surveys. One organization I worked with, Ashoka, had done quite a few surveys with teachers on joy and purpose. And doing things for the kids always made them come back to life. It was this other stuff, where it's like, the kids need this. Why are you being forced to assess that? That kind of gives you that internal struggle of like, what am I doing here? So when you tend to focus on the kids, you love your job. But then it's like the other stuff that kind of, I think, can drag you down. And so when you can, just keep it about the kids, and then usually you like what you do.
Yeah, yeah, and as long as you have that, then normally the end result gets to be what you want it to be. It's a long journey, and it's hard to see that in September, that by the time we get to July, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But that's even for me,
Well,
I've done it for like 14, 15 times now, that yearly process. And you still hit that point in October, November, go, oh no, here we go, here we go. And I had to write notes to myself, but I would refer back to saying it'll all be fine, all the kids will end up
yeah.
fine.
Well, I think the other thing is not to take some stuff too seriously, right? Like I remember, and this is why I said I'll get you in trouble. When they gave me that binder, I told the kids, listen, we're going to play the game 2 days a week. You go over this. The other 3 days we learn and we do, and that way it was like, okay, this is the game right now. We're not taking this part that seriously. We have to check off a box on this, but that's not what learning is. Learning is us doing these simulations and talking and our projects and having great dialogue and, what seems like a waste of a day, but talking about something that's happening in the world that they need to talk about, because those are all skills. That's communication. That's critical thinking. So I think I think teachers being confident that when they're doing it for the kids and for the right reasons, don't listen to the internal dilemma, because you're giving the kids what they need. And I feel like that's really good for your mental health, because I think there's a lot of pressure out there telling you you're doing it wrong and you're not.
Yeah, and from a lot of people who don't see your classroom, outside your organization, the media perception and social media now, where anybody can say anything about teachers, even though they've not been in
Yeah.
a classroom for 20 years. But hey, I'm not going to get into that, although I just did. And I think what you're talking about there kind of ties into the startup teacher kind of uh, emphasis, in that it is essentially a bit like a business. The startup teacher, when I first saw the title, I thought, that's for new teachers, that's not for me. How wrong I was. Because you're talking about setting up your classroom almost like a business, and that resonates with me as a business teacher, obviously, but also in terms of you can't set up a business with facts. Just because you know a lot of facts, it's not going to get you customers. It's not going to get you the skills to talk to people as they come in the door or click on your website and things like that. So, I mean, when did you have that light bulb moment of, we need to structure our kind of training in this book anyway around this idea of a business? Was that something you and Darcy both kind of agreed together, or how did that kind of form?
So I would say I mentioned this more to her as far as the startup stuff. So I have a lot more experience in the startup, social startup world than she does. I'm in all the incubators. I'm in quite a few groups. Like I do a lot on that end. And so what was interesting for me, in watching organizations, and I've gone through, a couple little ventures myself, is it's not personal, right? Like when you're starting an idea and you're trying to get it to work, you focus on the idea. Okay. So like, let's say the startup teacher book. Okay. If I want somebody to do the book, how am I adding value to them? Right. Like that might be one of the first questions I would ask myself, because it's not about, oh, they didn't buy the book, they don't like me, kind of thing. It's about, okay, what am I doing to engage people in the book? Does it have value for them? Am I reaching them properly? Do they have the capacity for this? And I feel like one thing I noticed with going through, if you're familiar with the business model canvas, I imagine you are, because you're a business teacher. I loved watching that in city after city. People could just get together and this 1-page document asked enough guiding questions for people to figure things out for themselves. And that was kind of a light bulb for me. Like, why don't we run professional learning like that? Because we hire all these consultants, just go in the staff room. They'll tell you what's happening and what should be done. So why aren't we tapping into that? And we don't need to pay for the consultants. You just need to trust in in the power of the people in your building. And I think that a lot of answers lie there. So that was kind of what led us to this educator canvas is, how can we create a tool where we can get out of people's way, but and enable them to kind of innovate and work on problems. And that's what we did. And then as far as like, kind of operationalizing a business, when you look at the different components that go into a business, usually it was just kind of a light bulb. I don't know when it happened, but it's like, why do we just think teaching is teaching, like it's just one word, and there's all these different parts that go into it, like the mental well-being, like we were talking about. Assessments go into it. Like classroom management. I mean, it just, okay, even the platform through it, like, are you using Zoom? Do you use Google Classroom? Like, there's just all these different components that make your classroom run. And sometimes when one thing doesn't go okay, it's not that you're a bad teacher. It's just like it's just a little part of the operation that needs to be tweaked. And I feel like when people can kind of, you know, not be more objective about certain components, it's easier to improve it because there's not this kind of like feeling of failure. You're not like, for instance, Google Classroom. I remember when we first went to remote learning, the teacher didn't explain to a lot of parents that they could take a picture on their phone, they could download the Google Classroom app and upload pictures. So I was talking to some parents, and they were having quite a time because they would take the pictures, email it to themselves, go to a desktop, then get on the thing. And it was taking them like 20 extra minutes because no one told them they could do it on the phone. This is where the business principles come in. I mean, I'm a big fan of also human-centered design. So that's why I often will say the social business, because I think empathy and really caring about your user and your impact is for me what I care about the most. It's never about, making money. So I just wanted to say that because sometimes when people are like, oh, business principles. No, I think if you want to make an impact, business principles can come in well, right? Because if you talk to your user and understand where the problem is, you can fix it. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the light bulb went off, because I constantly see social businesses asking those questions and trying and striving for like a better process, a better product, engaging people. And it's not a personal thing. It's not like their whole identity is wrapped up into it. It's just like, oh, okay, that's just not working. We'll tweak it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a useful mindset in the education space.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's certainly, given me a few light bulb moments as we start to prepare for next year, as our students start to leave here. So, in terms of the users then and the educators lab, obviously we can get your book on Amazon, I presume is the best place
Yes.
to be. We look for Startup Teacher. I
Yep.
can put some links like down here.
Okay.
But I mean, the educators lab then is like the last question here for educators lab. Then I'm going to throw another question at you just before we finish. But so for our users of the educators lab, one, where can we find it? And two, what are we going to find when we get there?
So it's theeducatorslab.com, and you will see just tools. So for instance, the educator canvas, the teacher hack, I'm adding a personalized PD choice board. We have a lot impact logs. So the goal is to enable teachers, and I don't know how the UK works, so sorry. But in the US, based on states, we're trying to ensure that teachers can get renewal credit for their teaching license by working on things that they want to learn and that they want to do for their students. So we're trying to provide as many tools as possible so teachers can get that credit. So you'll also see Darcy just finished a 30-day PD challenge. Teachers can get renewal credit for taking part in that. We will have soon a few book studies done with a couple PBS stations in the US. People can get certificates of completion, so they get credit for working on these things. It's not just, and that because our goal is to, we don't want it to be one more thing on your plate. We want to take something off of your plate. So we feel like if you can work on, yeah, we feel, yeah, like we feel like, okay, if you're already investing this energy to do something for your students, for yourself, like how do we give you credit for that, so that it can, it feels good, like you're checking off your list. Like in Virginia, I needed 180 renewal hours. So how do we give you those hours for doing these good things? So that's what you'll find on your site. We keep adding we have a ton of tools, so we'll keep adding tools. And then yeah, so that's largely what you will find there.
Wow. So you don't have all the answers then. Us teachers have got to go thinking and developing them. Is that something you found that also that people are like, this is the answer to your problem in your school with your students, and you seem to be going, okay, your students better.
Yeah, I don't, that's the thing. Yeah, of course we don't have the answers. Like, you meet the kids, like, so we trust you. Like, here are some tools, just like the business model canvas. You're this idea is your baby. These users are your your students. And like we were saying from the beginning, like, even as a teacher, we all know that, like, one class, something works, another class, you got to try something else. And that's why it's just so important to provide the tools, but like, get out of the way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for creating such an amazing resource for us. And I'm really loving getting stuck into the book, and I'll be banging on about it to some of mine. I look after an NQT here as well, so we'll be looking at that in our development meetings and things. So thank you so much for, to you and Darcy for doing that. I'm going to ask you one last question, which I haven't prepped you for, because that's the kind of guy I am. And you've said a lot of great advice anyway as we've gone through this. But if you could go back to when you were, say, 17, 18 years old, and give yourself a little piece of advice, or you wish somebody had given you some advice when you were, say, 17, 18, that maybe you'd stuck with you as a mantra and carried through, what would that advice be?
I don't know. You know what? I have to give, so, because I felt like I had a little bit more of a rocky road at that age. I just find someone who believes in you, and who lets you make your own mistakes. But yeah, like my parents used to tell me, they're like, don't worry about messing up. You can always come back home. And that was all the confidence I needed to try and fail. And so I think it's just important to kids. Like, if you have a cheerleader, hold on to them, because you're going to make mistakes, and it's always good to have a place to go back home when you do. So, but
awesome. Thank you so much. I really do. I can't imagine how busy you are there with everything that you're doing and all these different things.
It sounds like more than it is. It's always like that. I think I'm not in the classroom this year. I can't imagine being a teacher this year. But,
there you go.
yeah.
Not teacher busy.
Yeah, I feel like, but no, for the teaching, because I have 3 little ones, and just you're working, doing their school, whatever. It's just a crazy year, so I don't know how anyone's doing it. But
I don't know how we're doing it either. If I could tell you, I would, but I have no secrets or anything for you. So, but no, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay on the line just for a second. We'll say a proper cheerio. But for now, I'll just say, Michelle, thanks so much for talking business. Really appreciate it. And I hope that everybody gets a lot out of your book and your website, Startup Teacher and the Educators Lab. So thanks very much. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing your journey with us, and also why you find it so important and why you're giving back through the Startup Teacher and the Educators Lab to help teachers develop themselves and their careers so that they can serve learners and students even better. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, and fascinating to gain another insight into your excellent book. And to everybody else listening and watching, thanks to you too. Please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, and do all that fun stuff. I really appreciate it. You can find me by looking for Pardo's Business on your social media channels and the talkingbusinesspodcast.com. And I'll see you, or you'll see me and hear me again on another episode of Talking Business with me, Danny Pardo. Thank you. Bye-bye.